Let us begin, if you will, with the quiet drama of dawn. You are nestled under a semi-damp pile of animal hides, which you insisted on calling a bed, though no one else seemed to share your optimism. The hide smells faintly of last winter's unsuccessful mammoth stew. You try not to think about that as your eyes blink open to the soft, filtered gray light creeping in through the opening of your cave, an opening generously described as door-shaped by the elder who assigned you this spot. You're in a cave system, technically shared with 14 other individuals, 3 stone tools, and a possibly sentient lizard that no one has had the courage to name. Outside, the sun is still debating whether to rise or not. It's a chilly morning, as most were during this unspecified yet uncomfortably accurate prehistoric period. Your joints creak not from age, but from the sheer volume of damp moss you've been sleeping on. It doesn't help that your sleeping spot is next to the communal fire pit, which went out 3 hours ago, and now offers only the faint scent of old smoke and occasional regret. Beside you, someone is snoring. You don't know their name because names haven't exactly been invented yet. There are grunts and pointing, of course, but nothing you could reasonably embroider on a handkerchief. Not that you have a handkerchief. You have a small square of bark you sometimes sneeze into, but it's more of a personal experiment than a cultural tradition. As your senses return slowly, like molasses, uphill, you realize it's time to begin the day. That is to say, it's no longer considered night. The morning ritual begins not with coffee or alarm clocks, but with a vague shuffling toward the entrance of the cave to confirm that the sky still exists and hasn't collapsed into a second ice age. It hasn't, which is either comforting or disappointing, depending on your tolerance for routine. Now begins the stretching a time-honored tradition that mostly involves bending stiff limbs and making sounds not unlike a distressed elk. No one comments on these noises. Everyone makes them. They are understood to be communal and necessary. A few children, the small ones with too much energy and not enough sense, already dart between legs trying to find a shiny rock they can call a pet until they forget about it 3 minutes later. You stand now, more or less. Your knees complain, but in a way that suggests resignation rather than rebellion. You wrap yourself in a second hide, the one that smells marginally less like ancient goat. Outside, someone is tending to the fire. Tending in this case means poking at it with a stick and grunting at it like it owes them food. It doesn't respond. Fires in the Paleolithic period were notoriously aloof. Breakfast, such as it is, awaits. It consists of a piece of dried root that may once have been nutritious, or possibly just dirt, with aspirations. You chew it slowly. This is not because you're savoring it, but because chewing takes time, and time fills the void where food flavor might otherwise be. There is also water collected in a hollowed-out gourd that leaks slightly, but proudly. You sip from it and try not to think about the last time it was cleaned, which was probably never. At this point, the elder of the group, recognized for his advanced age of roughly 32, stands atop a large rock to address the tribe. He delivers the morning announcements. These include a warning about a nearby snake that bit someone's foot and then left unimpressed, a reminder not to throw stones at the moon because it doesn't do anything, and a ceremonial grunt that may or may not mean good luck. With that, the day begins in earnest. And what a day it shall be. Your job, as it has been for several moons now, is gathering, not glamorous perhaps, but dependable. You know which berries are probably not poison, and which mushrooms won't make you believe you're being chased by invisible antelope. You walk slowly toward the familiar part of the forest, your hands empty, but full of hope. A bird calls in the distance. No one responds. Birds are not considered trustworthy. As you pass a cluster of rocks shaped vaguely like your uncle's nose, you pause to appreciate the stillness. Life in the Paleolithic is not fast-paced. It does not ask for deadlines or meetings or performance reviews. It only asks that you stay alive, avoid obvious mistakes, and remember which direction home is. You breathe in. The air smells of pine soil and the gentle anxiety of someone who forgot to pack a second piece of root. And so your day begins. You shuffle your feet over a well-worn trail, marked only by the frequency with which you and your fellow gatherers have stepped on the same unfortunate patch of moss over the past month. The morning chill still clings to the air like an overly affectionate fog, and your breath emerges in slow, puffy plumes that vanish before you can decide if they're poetic. The forest here isn't dense, exactly more like undecided. Trees lean in at odd angles, their branches half-heartedly forming a canopy that lets through just enough light to make shadows confusing. You pass a bush you've named in your head as nope berries, due to a particularly memorable incident involving digestive regret and 3 hours of communal side-eyeing. The berries look temptingly plump today, like they want to be picked and regretted again. You shake your head at them sternly, the way a parent might address a shoe that keeps tripping them, moving on. You reach a clearing. You've visited often, though. Clearing may be generous. It's really just a patch of slightly shorter plants that begrudgingly let you step through without too much fuss. You kneel near a cluster of what you've decided are safe roots. The technical term is unknown, of course, but they're lumpy and vaguely edible, and that's enough for you. You dig gently with your fingers, feeling the cool soil part, like an ancient secret, slowly giving up its mystery. The root comes free with a satisfying pop, not unlike a polite hiccup from the earth itself. It's a good size, big enough to pretend it's 2 meals if you squint, and your stomach offers a brief, approving grumble. You add it to your bark sling, which you've woven yourself using time desperation, and fibers that came from a tree that definitely didn't give permission. Further into the woods, you spy a stand of low-growing plants whose leaves are shaped like disappointed hearts. These, you recall, were once part of a stew that only made 2 people mildly hallucinate a saber-toothed rabbit. So technically, they're a success. You pick them with care, trying not to disturb the beetles that consider these leaves their extended family. For a brief moment, one beetle raises a leg at you, as if in solemn farewell. You nod back. The relationship is respectful, if distant. Around you, the soundscape of the forest gently persists. Birds chirp with a kind of smug regularity. Something larger, probably a deer, possibly a member of your tribe who got distracted, is crunching through underbrush in the distance. You consider calling out, but realize you don't know the right grunt for are you a threat or just clumsy, so you opt for silence. It's safer. As the sun lifts higher, the warmth begins to spread slowly, like someone rolling out a blanket, one edge at a time. Your fingers thaw, and the root dirt under your nails begins to dry into what could charitably be called a natural manicure. You spot a patch of mushrooms nestled under a fallen log, their caps delicately speckled with dew. These are tricky. The ones with slightly rounded tops are generally fine, though mildly chewy. The flat ones once caused the shaman to compose a poem about time being a spiral, and then fall asleep in a pond. You squint at them, like they've personally wronged you. Picking the safe ones, you mutter a small phrase under your breath, not a word exactly, but a noise of cautious optimism. The forest hums on. A light breeze passes by and tugs gently at your hair, which you've tied back with a string of woven grass that holds only slightly better than your willpower at not eating the supplies. The breeze carries a faint scent of animal fur and distant smoke, possibly another group's fire, or perhaps the result of someone in your own tribe attempting to cook without remembering that fire is hot. Either way, it's not your problem yet. You return to the trail, such as it is, and pause by a gnarled old tree with bark that resembles the face of a relative you once shared berries with and never spoke to again after they hoarded the juiciest ones. You touch the bark lightly, not in reverence, but in the same way one might pat a door frame in passing. It's just something you do. You continue deeper into the woods, now toward a narrow trickle of a stream that sometimes yields herbs. These herbs aren't delicious per se, but they're very green and look convincing in a stew, which is half the battle. As you reach the water's edge, you crouch and splash your face, a gesture that feels cleansing, but mostly just makes your nose colder. The herbs are there, as usual, pretending to be worth the effort. You pluck a few, sniffing them, to make sure they still smell like something you don't fully trust. Into the sling they go. You glance at the sky, gauging time by the angle of the sun and the way your shadow now looks vaguely accusatory. It's not yet midday, but the ache in your knees and the slow weight of the gathered roots, leaves, and suspicious greens tells you it might be time to loop back. Not yet, though. There's one more place, one more patch, just beyond the ridge, where you once found a type of nut that didn't taste like failure. You hesitate, then begin the climb, the path gently winding upward through shrubs that whisper against your legs. A bird calls out again, this one louder, as if announcing your presence to the nearby world. You pause, ear tuning for the sound of movement, of anything that suggests you're not alone. There's nothing threatening, just wind and the occasional crunch of your own feet on leaf litter. You move on. The ridge is close now, and the promise of those rare, passably tasty nuts is just enough to keep your pace steady. Your sling is heavier, your fingers tingling slightly from the cold water, and now the warming air. The forest smells richer here, earthier, more complicated. Like something important is about to happen, though. What exactly you couldn't say. You reach the top, stepping carefully onto the rocky crest and look down toward the grove below. From the crest of the ridge, the grove sprawls below you, like a lazy animal, sunning itself in the mid-morning warmth, modest in scale. Just a gathering of stout, stubborn-looking trees with leaves that perpetually seem unsure if they're supposed to be green or brown. You've been here before, of course, twice last moon, and once before the unfortunate incident involving that suspicious squirrel and your now lost bark bowl. But this time feels different, or at least equally familiar, in a slightly improved light. You descend slowly each footstep down the uneven slope, stirring soft rustles and the occasional small cascade of pebbles that seem personally offended at being disturbed. The trees don't mind your arrival. They rarely do. They're not majestic or ancient, just dependable and vaguely lumpy, bearing nuts that aren't quite tasty, but also not life-threatening. In the Paleolithic world that makes them royalty, you choose the tree that once gave you 3 handfuls of its least bitter crop, mainly because you feel like you owe it a return visit. Its bark is cracked in vertical strips, and its trunk bulges near the base like it's trying to sit down, but forgot how. You pat it gently, as if it can remember your previous gratitude, and crouch beneath its branches. The nuts have already fallen, or rather, most of them have gravity, being one of the more consistent forces in your life these days. You scan the ground, your eyes, now practiced, in spotting those slightly oblong, faintly wrinkled shells amid the leaf litter. You pick one up, roll it between your fingers, sniff it out of habit. It smells like dry wood and optimism, which is good enough. You add it to your pouch, now visibly stretched and beginning to sag, like the face of someone who's just been told they're in charge of the fire tonight. A second nut follows, then a third, each one found with a little more confidence as you move through the grove in slow, careful circles. Occasionally, you pause to remove a small twig from your foot, or to adjust the grass twine of your belt, which has begun to dig into your side with the resolve of something trying to become part of your anatomy. The breeze here is more direct, lifting the leaves in short bursts, like it's shaking its head at you, but not unkindly. You find a cluster of nuts hidden beneath a fallen branch, the wood soft and speckled with moss. You shift the branch aside with your foot gently, but not reverently, and collect the prize beneath. The nuts here are less weathered, possibly spared the brunt of rain or early nibbles from less discerning wildlife. You imagine a future version of yourself enjoying these around the fire, gnawing politely and nodding at no one in particular. With your pouch nearing maximum dignity-bearing capacity, you take a moment to sit. You lean your back against the base of a particularly gnarled tree that resembles from a certain angle your cousin Orc's face during stew disappointment. The bark presses into your spine, but it's a familiar kind of discomfort. Around you, the forest hums in that way it does when it's not trying to impress anyone. Birds make half-hearted comments, leaves sigh intermittently, and a distant thump might be someone else tripping over the same route you did on your first visit. You reach into your pouch and pull out a nut, examining it closely. The shell is firm, but not invincible. You press it to the flat stone beside you and tap it with another stone, a technique you've refined through sheer necessity and one dramatic failure that involved a bruised finger and 4 days of sulking. The nut cracks open with a satisfying snap, revealing its pale, ridged interior. You sniff it again, not because you expect it to change, but because caution has become a personality trait. It smells fine. You nibble it slowly. It's dry, slightly bitter, and carries the unmistakable flavor of effort. It is not delicious, but it is food. A shadow moves nearby. You glance up. It's not large enough to alarm, but you tighten your grip on your gathering stick out of reflex. A small animal, perhaps a hare or a disoriented fox, moves through the underbrush, ignoring you with the practiced disinterest of a creature that knows you're more likely to trip over your own pouch than chase it. You relax. The moment passes. More nuts are gathered, each one another tick on the timeline of your day. There is no hurry, only steady rhythm. You've learned that rushing leads to accidents, and accidents in the forest are rarely amusing when you're the one responsible for your own first aid. One more circuit of the grove yields a final handful, and you begin to feel the pleasant weight of accomplishment. Not enough to boast about, if boasting were a thing, but enough to walk a little taller, even if your knees protest. You rise, brush the leaves from your legs, and glance once more around the grove. The trees stand, as they always have, quiet, mildly disinterested, and moderately generous. You nod to them again, a gesture that isn't required, but feels correct. Turning back toward the trail, you begin the slow climb out of the grove, each step a deliberate return to the larger rhythm of the day. The sun has climbed further now, the light sharper, but still soft enough to feel like a nudge rather than a command. Your pouch sways with each step, a soft percussion against your hip. Behind you, the grove remains unchanged and waiting, like it always does, and ahead. You begin the climb out of the grove with the deliberation of someone who understands that every step up a hill is a personal argument with gravity, and gravity never really loses. Your legs, now gently coated in forest dust and faint scratches of unknown origin, move with that rhythm particular to seasoned gatherers, neither fast nor slow. Just persistent, like a thought that refuses to leave. The pouch at your hip, heavier now, with roots, herbs, leaves, and your moderately prized collection of surprisingly cooperative nuts swings gently against your side like a quiet reminder of productivity. It's not swinging enough to be annoying, but just enough to say, yes, you have done something today, which in your world is more affirmation than most people get before lunch. The ridge underfoot crumbles here and there, each crunch of a pebble under your heel, prompting a tiny recalibration in your gait. Your left knee offers the occasional opinion, mostly unrequested about the angle of the incline. You do not argue with it. You've learned that acknowledging the complaints of one's joints only encourages them. The trees above thin slightly as you climb, letting the sun check in with a bit more warmth, like a half-interested elder, making sure you haven't fallen into a hole. Birds call intermittently, not melodically, but more like they're issuing short status reports to each other. Nothing threatening, just avian bureaucracy. Near the top of the ridge, you pause for breath, not dramatically, but in that subtle way where you pretend to adjust your pouch straps while quietly letting your lungs catch up. The breeze here is cooler, tinged with the faint scent of moss bark and whatever mysterious tree fungus decided to announce itself today. You resume walking, cresting the ridge again, this time facing the way back, the forest stretching before you in comforting disorder. You recognize familiar shapes. The crooked pine that looks like it's mid-sneeze. The cluster of boulders you've internally dubbed the sleeping mammoths for reasons both obvious and private. And the small clearing where once quite memorably a squirrel stared you down while stealing your entire breakfast. That squirrel hasn't been seen since, but its legacy lives on in your decision to never eat near obvious escape routes. The descent is easier, though your balance becomes a game of mild corrections. A root here, a rock there, nothing catastrophic, just nature's way of reminding you it is in fact paying attention. As you move, the pouch continues to bounce more confidently, now almost cheerfully. You place a hand over it briefly to steady the rhythm, the way one might calm a particularly smug child who just learned a new word. There is no path, not in any modern sense, but your feet know where to go. They've made this journey enough times that the forest feels less like a maze and more like an unusually leafy hallway. You pass the bush with the suspicious berries still too red, still too eager, and offer it a nod of respect and disinterest. You pass the half-rotten log with the one mushroom that always looks slightly judgmental. You do not take it. Some things are better left to quietly rot. As you near the midpoint of your return, you hear the faint sound of voices, not words exactly, but the low conversational grunts and occasional chuckles of your tribe. Someone must be gathering nearby, likely sharing theories on which routes are least disappointing, or arguing whether that bird overhead is a hawk or just a really confident pigeon. You consider joining them, but your pouch is full, your legs are committed, and small talk requires more emotional investment than you're prepared to give before noon. Instead, you veer left at the bend in the stream, taking the quieter route home, the one lined with tall grass that hisses softly as you pass. This path has fewer distractions and one rather charming rock formation that looks like a person in mid-sneeze, which you find comforting for reasons you've never questioned. The sun is higher now, the light filtering through the leaves in uneven patches that dance across the ground with every breeze. It's warm, but not uncomfortably so. The kind of warmth that says, you may not be thriving, but you are certainly not perishing, which in this era is the closest thing to a compliment. You shift your pouch again, feeling the subtle redistribution of its contents, each nut and root finding its preferred position, like passengers on a bumpy cart ride. The herbs have started to smell more pungent, which means they're either releasing their healing properties or starting to turn. You choose to believe the former. At the final bend before the cave slope, you pause at the small pool formed by a recent rain. A puddle, really, but in your mind it has earned the title of reflecting pool because sometimes it catches the sky just right. You crouch beside it, peering into the slightly murky water. Your reflection blinks back, wild-haired, forest-dusted a face that could be 30 winters or just a particularly tired 20. It's hard to tell, with all the sun and wind and limited skincare options. You splash a bit of water on your face, more ritual than hygiene, and watch as the ripples distort your image into something abstract and oddly reassuring. The splash leaves small droplets on your tunic, which darken the fabric briefly before fading. Standing again, you pat your pouch, adjust your belt, and begin the last stretch. The trees thin further here, and through the foliage, you can just begin to glimpse the outer ledge of the cave. The familiar rock face mottled with age, soot, and the occasional, mysterious red smear no one has successfully explained. A faint curl of smoke rises. Someone has restarted the fire, or perhaps just failed to put it out properly. Either way, it's a sign that home is close. Your legs find new purpose, not faster, but more certain, like they know the stone underfoot again, and each step carries you closer. You follow the worn slope that leads to your cave with the measured certainty of someone who has no pressing reason to rush, but also no particular desire to dawdle in plain view of the local hawk population, who, despite their lack of interest in nuts or roots, always seem to look down on you with the faint air of judgment. The cave mouth appears slowly as you approach, framed by those familiar scraggly bushes that never seem to grow or die, just exist in a perpetual state of shrub. The smoke curling upward is indeed from the communal fire pit, which is now alive again, smoldering gently and releasing a scent that's part wood, part burnt leaf, and part something you suspect used to be a lizard. Someone has clearly attempted to cook. Whether they succeeded is still unclear, but the fire lives, and that is victory enough in a world where matches have not yet been invented, and flint strikes require the patience of a saint and the wrist strength of a minor deity. You pass the flat rock near the entrance, the one with the slightly shiny groove in it, where people tend to sit and think about things, though rarely anything productive. As you step into the dim coolness of the cave, the light behind you narrows and fades, replaced by the flickering glow of firelight and the subtle, shifting shadows of your companions. A few figures are visible, all engaged in activities that could generously be described as tasks, though none seem particularly urgent. One person is scraping something from a hide that has clearly given up, while another pokes at a pile of sticks as if waiting for them to self-assemble into a basket. You nod in their general direction. No one speaks, not because of tension, but because conversation requires energy, and energy is a precious resource, better reserved for chewing. You settle near the edge of the fire's reach, where the warmth is enough to soothe, but not enough to sweat. You unfasten your pouch and begin the methodical process of unpacking, laying out your gathered treasures on a flat stone that has unofficially become your sorting station. First, the roots still firm, still dusty, still stubbornly root-shaped. Then the herbs, which crumple slightly under your fingers, but release their scent in a way that says they haven't completely given up on life. You arrange them in a small pile, then separate the nuts into two groups, ones that look crackable and ones that might require emotional support. This process takes longer than it needs to, not because you're particularly meticulous, but because taking your time feels like a small luxury in a world where most decisions are made in the moment and under duress. Behind you, a child lets out a high-pitched squeal, not of distress, but of the peculiar joy reserved for discovering a beetle that looks mildly terrifying. The child's mother grunts disapprovingly and flicks a piece of ash in their direction, a traditional expression of "don't put that in your mouth," known across generations. You lean back against the cave wall, the stone cool and irregular against your shoulder blades, and take a moment to do nothing. Doing nothing you've learned is an art form. It's not idleness. It's a studied, intentional stillness. You let your limbs loosen, your eyes rest slightly, out of focus, your breath fall into that slow rhythm that says, "I could get up at any moment, but I won't." Someone throws a stick on the fire. Sparks rise, casting a brief constellation of light across the cave ceiling. You watch them fade, drifting back into the smoke trail like tiny stars losing interest. Your stomach rumbles quietly. It's not a complaint, just a suggestion. You glance at your nut pile and select one from the cooperative half, using a nearby rock that has definitely seen better days. You begin the cracking process again. It takes several careful taps before the shell gives in, revealing the pale, wrinkled prize within. You eat it slowly, as if tasting matters. It doesn't, but the ritual is comforting. Around you, the cave murmurs in low, ambient sounds, someone humming off-key while weaving twine, another clearing their throat like they're preparing to speak, but won't. The fire crackles in gentle protest at the stick just added. The air smells of warmth, faint dampness, and old stone. You shift slightly and reach for another nut. This one cracks easily, almost enthusiastically, and for a moment you wonder if nuts can be eager. You eat it in 2 bites, still slow, still deliberate. From deeper within the cave, a quiet rustling suggests someone rearranging sleeping hides, or possibly preparing for a mid-morning nap, which in this society is not just accepted, but quietly revered. You consider joining them, but the thought requires movement, and you're currently quite committed to inertia. A gnat drifts past your ear. You wave it away with the languid authority of someone who knows they'll see it again in 10 seconds. Someone across the fire grunts in your direction. You look up, meet their eyes, briefly, then nod once. Nothing more needs to be said. The grunt was a form of greeting, or perhaps inquiry, or possibly just a bored vocal stretch. It doesn't matter. You've acknowledged it. That's enough. You return your gaze to the fire, letting the flickers fill your vision. It is mesmerizing in its predictability. Bright, dark spark, crackle, repeat. Time here doesn't tick so much as wander, like a mildly confused goat looking for the right patch of grass. You lean your head back and close your eyes, not to sleep, not yet, but to rest your vision from the dancing firelight. Your hands rest on your lap, fingers still smudged with earth and resin, and the faint stickiness of something you'd rather not identify. Your breath slows again, chest rising and falling in rhythm with the crackling flames, the distant shifting of bodies, the soft tap of something dripping from the ceiling into a hollow stone. The weight of the morning's gathering still rests in your muscles, but now it's more background hum than ache. You sit there, fire-lit and full of mild effort, your thoughts drifting, not far, but just enough lazily, looping toward the thought that maybe, just maybe, it might be time soon to consider something resembling food. Not a feast, not even a proper meal, but something hot enough to remind your stomach it hasn't been entirely forgotten. You ease yourself off the stone with a series of small, approving cracks from your knees, and a soft grunt that in this context translates loosely to "this is fine." Your pouch lies emptied beside you, its job for the day, done now, slumped like a tired dog at the end of a very slow hunt. The fire has brightened since your earlier observations, thanks to the addition of one or possibly two new logs, though it's hard to say if they were placed intentionally or simply fell in as someone nearby adjusted their seating. Smoke drifts upward in casual spirals, occasionally interrupted by a spark or the sharp pop of moisture escaping wood. You step closer, careful not to stir the ash circle that loosely defines the communal cooking space, which, while not strictly enforced, is deeply respected. You scan the perimeter for something pot-like. There is a bowl of sorts, a stone basin half filled with a mixture that might generously be called stew. It has the color of wet bark and a texture best described as ambitious. Floating near the top is what might be a leaf or a very old piece of onion, though its identity remains politely unconfirmed. You nod to the figure hunched beside it, who nods back in a way that suggests, yes, this is still technically edible. You crouch and wait. That is the etiquette here. No sudden movements, no reaching. One waits beside the fire, demonstrating patience and humility in the hopes that someone with a longer stick or a less discerning palate will stir and share. Eventually, the stew keeper reaches for a large, soot-darkened stick and gives the pot a slow, lazy swirl. Bits bow and turn, rearranging themselves into new combinations of almost food. A portion is ladled into a hollowed-out gourd, which is then held out to you without ceremony. You take it with both hands and a nod of sincere, if reserved, appreciation. The gourd is warm, but not dangerously so, and the contents emit a smell that lands somewhere between boiled moss and wishful thinking. You retreat a few steps, settling onto a flat patch of stone with a shallow dip perfect for gourd cradling. The first sip is cautious, as it should be. It is not bad. This, you've come to learn, is high praise. The flavors are familiar root, a hint of salt, if someone remembered the riverweed, and the ghost of something that was once meat adjacent. There is a surprising chunk that resists your chewing. You chew anyway. It softens eventually. Around the fire, Others eat with similar quiet intensity. No one speaks much during lunch, not from tradition, but because speaking takes breath. And breath is needed for chewing, and not accidentally choking on sinew. You take another mouthful, slower this time, letting the warmth settle in your chest and spread like the gentle satisfaction of solving a small, boring problem. The fire snaps again, and someone tosses in another stick, casually, like feeding a lazy pet. After your third or fourth bite, it's hard to measure portions when the spoon is a piece of flat bark. You pause to stare into the flickering coals. They shift and glow with an indifferent beauty. Red at the center, gray at the edges, little cracks of light opening and closing like tiny mouths whispering ancient recipes that never included measurements. A faint breeze curls into the cave entrance, stirring the edge of your tunic and reminding you that yes, the outside still exists and will be waiting for you later. For now, though, this moment belongs to the fire and the taste of warm things. You reach the bottom of the gourd. A few stray grains cling to the sides, reluctant to leave. You scrape them up with the edge of your bark spoon, not out of hunger exactly, but from principle. Nothing goes to waste, not even a spoonful of mystery-flavored porridge. When finished, you set the gourd aside and give it the traditional post-meal rinse with a thumb swipe and a vaguely satisfied sigh. A nearby elder emits a similar sigh, which may be coincidence, or may be his quiet commentary on the quality of the broth. You exchange a look of shared endurance, the kind that says, "We have eaten this before, and we will eat it again." The fire settles the circle around it, quieting into a sort of digesting lull. Some lean back against cave walls. Others stretch out their legs with slow, deliberate effort. A few begin fiddling with tools, chipping stones, reshaping sticks, or adjusting the netting on a particularly ambitious trap that has yet to catch anything besides leaves and small arguments. You feel the weight of the meal settle in your belly. Not heavy, but enough to make your limbs feel a little looser. Your thoughts a bit slower. Your eyelids flirtatiously low. This is the part of the day that isn't really work and isn't really rest. It's the in-between, a kind of communal pause where nothing is expected and everything is mildly considered. Someone near the back of the cave begins humming. It's not a song, you know it might not be a song at all, but it follows a pattern that feels old and round and safe. You don't join in, but you let the sound drift around you, soft and harmless, like smoke that forgot how to rise. You shift your position, legs crossed, arms loose in your lap, head tilted just enough to watch the fire without fully focusing. The hum continues mixed now with the light clatter of stones, the occasional crack of firewood, and the deep, slow breathing of someone already napping. You could nap too. The hide pile in the corner looks vaguely inviting, or at least adequately dry. But napping now might turn into sleeping, and sleeping might mean missing the chance to contribute, which is to say, participate in the vague but necessary business of community upkeep, the kind of chore that doesn't have a name, only a series of motions that, when performed regularly enough, prevent things from collapsing, breaking, or inviting something unpleasant to nest where it shouldn't. You rise with the kind of half-commitment reserved for tasks that are not urgent, but quietly important. Brushing crumbs of bark and phantom dust from your tunic as you do. Around you, the cave has entered its post-lunch phase. Fewer sounds, fewer ambitions. A shared understanding that this is the lull, but not the end. The humming has faded, replaced by soft scraping, as someone nearby works a bone into something vaguely tool-shaped. You stretch one arm, then the other, partly to signal motion, and partly to remind your own shoulders they still exist. A familiar figure gestures toward the mouth of the cave with their chin. You understand. It is the universal sign for, let's go see if the water basket is still leaking, or if the goat-like creature that occasionally visits has knocked it over again. You nod, of course, because this is the sort of task that feels noble in its mundanity. The two of you step out into the light, blinking against the change, the cave behind you, sighing like a sleeping beast, the fire's smoke curling upward in slow waves that vanish into the sunlight. The path to the water storage area isn't a path so much as a well-trodden series of squished patches between rocks, grass, and occasionally someone's discarded stick. You walk in silence, the kind that's friendly, easy, the kind that doesn't need filling. Your companion is taller, a little older, the sort of person who always smells faintly of bark and unspoken advice. They carry a bundle of reeds under one arm, possibly for basket repairs, or maybe just because that's the kind of person they are, someone who always finds things to carry. The water basket, or more precisely, the semi-woven container, lined with tree sap and good intentions, sits near a dip in the land where runoff collects during rain. It is not beautiful, but it is functional in the way an object becomes when people have stopped expecting it to fail. You crouch beside it, checking the lining. It is sticky, uneven, but mostly intact. A small leak glistens near the base. Nothing catastrophic, just persistent. Your companion clicks their tongue, not in disapproval, but acknowledgement. You reach for the nearest reed, already understanding your role. They sit beside you, and together without speaking, you begin the process of patching, stripping the reeds, softening them slightly, pressing them into the gap with gentle pressure and occasional muttering. The repair is slow, but not tedious. It has a rhythm, a subtle tempo of twist, press, wipe, test. A dragonfly hovers nearby, watching like a tiny critic with iridescent wings and no suggestions. The sun overhead is warm but forgiving, casting shadows that dance slightly with the shifting breeze. As the reed takes hold and the sap begins to bond, you pause to stretch your fingers, flexing them with the satisfaction of small progress. Your companion grunts approvingly and begins reinforcing the opposite seam, not because it's broken, but because it will be soon, which is reasoning you've learned not to question. You work for a while longer, adding layers, smoothing edges, not rushing. Nothing about this demands speed. When it's done, or close enough to be called done by anyone not obsessive, you both sit back and admire the slightly improved basket. It still leans a little to one side, still smells faintly of mildew, but it holds water and doesn't insult the ancestors with its effort. You wipe your hands on a nearby patch of grass, watching as the sap clings stubbornly before finally yielding to friction and blades. The sun has shifted slightly, the shadows longer now, as if the day itself is settling into its chair and preparing for evening. Your companion stands first, stretching with a familiar groan that sounds vaguely triumphant. You follow slower, your knees echoing the sentiment, but with less optimism. The walk back is the same, but quieter, your steps falling into unintentional sync, the basket slung between you, its patched belly swaying with each movement like a sleepy animal, with nothing urgent to do. You reach the cave just as someone is beginning to arrange the dinner fire, not cooking, yet just the ritual of gathering wood, placing it, considering its angles, like it might care. You set the basket down beside the others, placing a small stone next to it to keep it honest. No one thanks you, but someone nods, which is more than enough. You return to your spot near the entrance, the flat rock still holding the warmth of earlier sun. You sit, not heavily, just with intent, letting your legs stretch out, your fingers resting loosely in your lap, the faint trace of sap still stubborn beneath your nails. Around you, the pace of the cave begins to shift again, a slow hum building as evening whispers its way in, not dramatically, but steadily, the air turning cooler, the shadows longer, the fire now being coaxed into life once more one spark at a time. You watch without watching your thoughts, circling quiet, but not still, already drifting toward the next likely, a source of food, because while your stomach isn't yet insisting it has started, whispering little reminders, polite at first, the kind that hint rather than demand. The cave is slowly filling again with movement, not loud or rushed, just the kind of collective shuffling that suggests everyone has remembered that evening doesn't feed itself. You remain seated for a moment longer, watching as two figures near the fire debate wordlessly over the placement of a particularly stubborn log. One wants it angled to the left, the other to the right, and neither seems willing to give in. Eventually, a third person, smaller, probably not emotionally invested in either angle, nudges the log directly into the middle. No one argues. That is the solution now. The fire thanks them by flaring up with a brief whoosh. Not impressive, but adequate casting, dancing orange light onto the cave walls, and briefly illuminating a smear that might be paint soot or very old food. You rise slowly, not due to stiffness, but in careful respect to your limbs' sense of timing. Around you, others are gathering their contributions for the evening meal. Some bring handfuls of greens or the occasional shriveled root. One person carries a fish that may have died of natural causes, though no one asks. You check your own stash, which you had the foresight to tuck behind a stone. Earlier 2 nuts, a bit of bitter herb, and what might be a slice of dried tuber, if you're feeling generous with language. You bring it all toward the cooking area, joining the loose semicircle of meal preparers. No one is in charge. Not exactly, though one individual, older, squinting, always chewing, something, tends to make decisions that others rarely challenge. They reach for the shared pot, currently resting in a tripod of stones above the flame, and begin the layering process. Root pieces first, then greens, then whatever protein arrives in time. You wait your turn, watching the slow ceremony of food assembly, each addition received with a grunt of approval, or in rare cases, a thoughtful silence. Your offerings are accepted without fanfare, added to the mix, with the kind of nod that says, yes, this will contribute to calories. The fish, mercifully, is placed on a separate stone slab near the fire's edge to be roasted rather than boiled, possibly because it still carries the vague scent of pond and resignation. As the pot simmers and the fire crackles, the air begins to shift, thickening with the scent of warm roots and hopeful seasoning. Someone stirs the pot with a carved stick that's seen better days, but continues to fulfill its duty. You sit near the edge again, legs crossed, hands folded, watching the process with the detached interest of someone who knows it's polite to pay attention, but also knows nothing surprising will happen. Dinner here is never exciting. That's the beauty of it. Predictability is a form of comfort, and comfort in this place and time is its own kind of luxury. Nearby, a young one tries to poke the fish with a curious stick and is gently redirected by a quiet grunt from someone older. This is how learning happens. No lectures, no rules, just small noises and gestures repeated over many days until everyone understands their part. As the food continues to cook, small conversations begin, soft exchanges, more gestures than speech. Someone recounts seeing a strange bird near the river. Someone else claims the bird was actually a leaf. No one insists. The story is not the point. It is the sharing that matters, the low murmur of voices, creating a kind of social glue that binds without pressure. You add your voice now and then, mostly small observations, or appreciative noises, enough to be part of the group, but not enough to dominate. You've learned that those who speak least tend to be listened to more closely. The stew begins to bubble with confidence. Its color shifts from vague beige to something approaching nourishment. The older chewer tastes it with a carved spoon, makes a noise that might mean edible, and passes the spoon along. Others taste in turn, each adding a pinch of something: salt, leaf, ground bark, crushed seed, until the flavor stabilizes into a consensus. The fish is flipped, smoke rising in a brief hiss as its skin crisps against the stone. A few sparks leap upward, disappearing into the air like impatient spirits. Now comes the portioning. There are no bowls, not really, but each person has a vessel of some sort, a hollowed gourd, a flat stone, a bark plate that holds together out of sheer habit. The older one ladles out portions with the practiced fairness of someone who knows exactly how many bites each person expects and how many they deserve. You receive yours near the middle of the process, your gourd filled halfway, not too much, not too little. It steams gently, the surface dotted with flecks of green and a single translucent chunk that may once have been turnip. You hold it in your lap for a moment, letting the warmth seep into your thighs, letting the smell prepare your mind for eating. Around you, others begin to eat each with their own method, some fast, some slow, some alternating bites, with sips of water or chews of root bark. You follow suit, tasting the stew first. It is stew. Warm, vaguely textured, faintly vegetal. Not memorable, but perfectly adequate. You eat it all, savoring the rhythm of spoon to mouth, the soft scrape of gourd, the warmth that fills your chest without asking much in return. The fish is passed in pieces, each person tearing a bit with practiced hands, sharing what little oil and flavor it holds. You receive a piece that is mostly skin and bone, but it crunches in a satisfying way, and for a moment you feel oddly luxurious. Once the meal is done, the gourds are licked clean, the stones wiped with leaves, the sticks leaned back near the fire to be used again. No one announces the end, but everyone begins to shift the circle, loosening people rising or lying back, preparing for the slow slide into evening's quieter tasks, the firelight softening the cave, breathing as one as it prepares for what follows dinner, which is not work in the traditional sense, but a kind of collective fiddling that eases the mind and hands into a quieter rhythm. There is no official name for this part of the day. No declaration that the sun has dipped low enough to justify unproductivity, but everyone seems to feel it all the same. The light outside the cave softens to a dusty amber, filtering in through the entrance in long slanted beams that land across the stone floor like sleepy sun snakes. You set your empty gourd aside with a satisfying thunk and stretch your legs, ankles cracking softly, not unpleasantly. Around you, others are settling into their preferred positions, backs against the wall, legs folded, hands busy with the modest labors of twilight. One person takes up a bundle of grass fibers and begins weaving slow, deliberate motions that create something useful or decorative, or both, though no one will say for sure. Another sharpens a flint edge, the soft scrape of stone against stone, repeating with the reliability of someone who has nothing else to do and nowhere else to be. You reach for your own task, a half-finished net of bark strands you've been making for 3 evenings now. It isn't for anything in particular, too small for fishing, too rough for carrying, but it gives your fingers something to occupy themselves with, and sometimes that's all that matters. The bark fibers are dry but pliable, and as you twist and knot them into place, your mind wanders in that slow, unhurried way it tends to do at this hour. Not to anything urgent, there is no urgency here, but to thoughts of the day's earlier foraging, to the cracked nut that yielded surprisingly clean meat to the tree that looked slightly more crooked than before. Small things, unremarkable but pleasing in their own quiet way. Across the fire, someone begins humming again, possibly the same tune from earlier, or a new one that just happens to fit the mood. The sound is soft and low, like the cave itself is settling in with the rest of you, exhaling after a long breath held since morning. Children, now sticky with sap and dirt, are gently corralled toward the sleeping area by their respective parents, who use soft nudges and occasional eyebrow tilts to suggest bedtime without insisting on it. Some resist with bursts of energy, racing in circles around the fire before collapsing into heaps of giggles and grass-stained limbs. You glance over the corner of your mouth, twitching into something that might be mistaken for a smile. The warmth from the fire is steady now, not fierce, just enough to make the cave feel less like a hole in the ground and more like a shared intention. Someone adds a fresh log to it slowly, with the kind of care that says we will need this warmth later, and the flames rise a little higher, casting new shadows that flicker across the uneven walls like ghostly dancers. Your net grows slightly, another row of knots added, not perfect, but consistent. You don't mind its flaws. You've come to appreciate the uneven edges of things, the way imperfections mark an object as used, lived with, contributed to. Beside you, a companion begins carving something from a piece of driftwood, perhaps a tool handle, perhaps a figurine. It's hard to tell in the dim light, and they don't say. You nod to them once. They grunt back, not interrupting the rhythm of their strokes. A small pile of wood shavings gathers at their feet. From deeper in the cave comes the muted sound of someone coughing, not sharply, just a reminder of age or lingering dust. And another responds with a murmur and a hand on their shoulder. These are the conversations of the evening brief, low, made of gesture more than sound, shared in the comfort of presence rather than the pursuit of meaning. You continue working your net, the task requiring just enough attention to prevent you from drifting entirely, though not enough to feel like effort. The fibers twist between your fingers, dry but not brittle, and the smell of bark lingers pleasantly on your skin. Occasionally, you pause to stretch your back, roll, your shoulders blink away the firelight's shimmer. The shadows around the cave deepen as the last of the day's light fades outside. The stars are out now, though no one looks just yet. That's for later. For now, there is still time for this. The quiet hum of tasks that don't need finishing, the shared space of people who have lived through another day and found themselves, once again, seated around a fire. Someone brings over a bundle of reeds and sits beside you, beginning a similar net. And for a while, the two of you work in silent tandem. Your patterns, not identical, but close enough to suggest a shared rhythm. Occasionally, your elbows bump. No one apologizes. This is the closeness of familiarity, not inconvenience. The air cools further, and the fire crackles in response, sending a brief burst of sparks into the upper darkness. They vanish quickly, tiny vanishing points of heat, leaving behind only the soft rustle of woven strands, the faint scratch of carving, and the quiet, steady exhale of a community, not at rest exactly, but gently winding down. The net in your lap has grown by several rows now, uneven and honest, and your hands slow as the night deepens, your fingers beginning to still. Not from fatigue, but from a recognition that the time for making is yielding slowly to the time for being, which is not quite sleeping, not quite dreaming, but something softer in between. Your hands rest in your lap, the netting now limp across your knees like a forgotten thought. Around you, the energy of the cave has shifted, not diminished exactly, but thinned and stretched into longer silences and slower movements. The carving across the fire continues, though, now at half speed, the strokes more meditative than productive. You set your half-made net aside, nestling it gently near your pouch, and a smoothed stone that has, for reasons unknown, become your unofficial storage spot. You rise slowly, joints murmuring in quiet chorus, and move toward the back of the cave, where the sleeping arrangements have begun to take their familiar shapes. There are no beds, not as future generations would understand them, but there are hide piles and moss bundles, and the occasional well-flattened area that has been claimed by repetition. Your own space is modest. 2 hides, one softer than the other, and a pile of slightly lumpy, dried grass you once declared the pillow, and have not been challenged on since. You smooth the area with your foot, gently brushing away a few stray pebbles that have wandered in over the course of the day. Others move around you, performing their own quiet rituals. One person adjusts the alignment of their hide with great care, turning it twice, then twice again, before lying down with a sigh that seems far too large for such a small body. A couple near the entrance curls into one another, their breathing already sinking in the way long companionship tends to do. Children shuffle into their corners, some resisting sleep, with exaggerated yawns and wide eyes that pretend they're still listening to stories that ended 2 hours ago. You lie down on your back first, letting your spine press against the thin insulation, letting the coolness of the cave floor remind you of where you are, which is both nowhere and home. The ceiling above you is faintly lit by the last flickers of firelight, casting soft moving shadows that ripple gently with each pop of the logs. You shift to your side, then curl slightly, finding the position that your body prefers for this particular night, which is slightly different than last night, and slightly more so than the night before. This is not out of restlessness, but because every day leaves its own impressions, some in your mind, some in your joints, and the shape of your rest must accommodate them. Around the cave, small noises continue. A sniff, a shuffle, the tap of someone adjusting their flint stash so it doesn't poke them in the ribs come midnight. The cave breathes with you now, a chorus of sleeping sounds, not synchronized, but compatible. Someone begins a low hum, a nighttime lull, not meant to be heard so much as felt. It fades after a few phrases, absorbed into the stillness, like mist into soil. You close your eyes, not to sleep yet, but to watch the patterns behind your eyelids form and dissolve. They are not dreams, these flickers, but preludes, memories and shadows, and the ghost of sun-dappled trees all blend together into shapes that do not require interpretation. Your breathing slows, not because you will it, but because it knows. Knows that the day is finished, that the food has been eaten, the tasks completed, the repairs made, the conversations had, and now there is nothing left but the soft blankness of a night without fear. Somewhere toward the front of the cave, the fire is tended. One last time, just a shift of logs, a nudge of coals, a few slow breaths to coax it into a steady, smoldering burn. It is not bright anymore, but it is warm, and the cave holds that warmth like a promise. You are not alone. The walls curve around you. The ground rises beneath you. The sound of familiar breathing surrounds you. Nothing moves fast anymore. The night belongs to quiet, and in this space, quiet is sacred. Your hand brushes the edge of your hide, fingers curling gently into its worn softness, the texture familiar in a way that bypasses thought. You remember vaguely the first time you used this hide, how it smelled too strongly, how it scratched your arms, how now it is just part of the background of your body. You shift again, minimally, finding the spot where your hip doesn't press too hard, and your shoulder doesn't fold uncomfortably. A small rock presses gently at your back, but you let it stay. It has earned its place. Outside the cave, the night deepens. The stars continue their slow wheel across the sky, unseen but not forgotten. Somewhere distant, a night creature calls not a threat, not nearby, just another voice in the great layered hush that settles over everything. Inside the cave is silent now, but for the breathing and the soft rhythm of slumber that begins to ripple across the bodies tucked in skins and moss and silence. You are not asleep, not yet, but you are floating, just above it, drifting without urgency, listening without ears, your mind gently loosening its grip on the day that your body, resting, not because it must, but because it can. The cave does not speak. It holds, it waits, it cradles. And in this stillness you begin to sink slowly into a kind of waking sleep, or perhaps sleeping wakefulness, where time folds inward and outward, like a sleeping animal, stretching in place. You do not dream, not in the narrative sense, but you drift through sensations and fragments of memory, leaves brushing your arm as you passed that bent oak tree, the echo of your own footsteps over damp ground, the warmth of your gourd resting against your leg while you ate something not entirely disappointing. These images rise and dissolve, replaced by others that feel equally familiar, equally unimportant, and yet somehow comforting in their lack of urgency. You shift once in your sleep pile, only half aware of it, pressing your face slightly deeper into the coarse grass of your pillow, which smells faintly of the outdoors. And that one time, it got too close to the fire. Someone nearby turns over with a soft grunt, the kind that says nothing but marks a transition from one phase of rest to another. A few feet beyond, a child whimpers, once, then quiets, pacified either by a gentle hand or the sheer weight of exhaustion. The fire, still burning in its low and dignified way, emits an occasional crackle, reminding you it is there, doing its duty as night watch and warmth giver, as much a presence as any other member of the tribe. The cave holds steady. It has seen thousands of nights like this. Nights with rain, with wind, with the sounds of prowling things just beyond its reach. But tonight, there is no rain. The wind is still. The only prowling is that of slow dreams across sleeping minds. You breathe deeply, evenly, your chest rising and falling like the rhythm of a song that has no words. Time passes, or it doesn't. In the dark, it's hard to tell. But gradually, very gradually, the temperature shifts. It's not cold yet, but cooler, the kind of cool that makes you tug the hide just a little higher over your shoulder. Not because you're chilled, but because your body understands this is the hour when night begins to turn. Outside, though, you cannot see it. The stars have wheeled nearly full circle. Somewhere beyond the tree line, birds that don't know how to keep decent hours are beginning to chirp their calls, hesitant, testing the silence like a toe dipped into still water. You are awake now, just barely. Your eyes remain closed, but your mind is hovering just beneath the surface, aware of breath of the weight of your body, of the faint scent of smoke still curling from the dying embers. You do not move yet. No one does. This is the softest part of the night, the moment before the day begins to think about starting. In time, though, you hear the familiar shuffle of early risers, 2, maybe 3. They move slowly, deliberately, placing each foot as if apologizing to the stone. These are the fire watchers, the water checkers, the ones who choose to wake before light, either by habit or by nature. You are not one of them, but you recognize their sounds. One of them coughs a dry, polite sound that bounces once against the cave wall and then disappears into the silence. A fire stick is moved. Coals are prodded. There is the soft whoosh of a breath blown across embers, followed by the tentative hiss of bark catching flame. The fire brightens just a little. It paints new shadows across the walls, revealing again the scatter of sleeping forms and forgotten objects, a cracked gourd, a smoothed stone, a pile of twine that someone meant to finish, but didn't. You roll slowly onto your back. Your eyes remain half closed, filtering the new light without accepting it fully. Your body knows that rising now would mean committing to the day, and you're not quite ready for that. Not yet. You let the warmth of your hide settle over you once more, a small pocket of preserved night amid the growing whisper of morning. The fire murmurs low and consistent, the way only a well-tended flame can. You watch it now through slitted eyes, its flickers and flares forming small dances you've seen before and will see again. No two are the same, but all feel familiar. One of the early risers steps past you, a tall figure with a fur draped over one shoulder and a bundle of something in their arms. They do not speak. They do not need to. You know them by gait, by scent, by the way they stoop near the fire and begin arranging stones in a pattern that means we might cook soon, but no pressure. A few others begin to stir, now soft groans, muffled yawns, the rustle of hides being pushed aside or pulled up. It is not a rush, not even a true awakening, more like a slow exhale, shared by many mouths, the cave collectively acknowledging that yes, the night is ending, and yes, we still exist, and no, nothing has eaten us yet. You close your eyes again for a moment, just one moment more, savoring the final stretch of horizontal peace before the day asserts itself more confidently. You know what comes next, the rising, the stretching, the cautious discussion of what might be eaten, the checking of the sky for weather news. But for now, you are still partly night. The edge of your world is firelight and silence and the quiet anticipation of another day, you have not yet begun to live. You are not ready, but soon you will be. You always are. And as the warmth of the hide wraps itself around your shoulders, and the fire hums gently at your feet, you remain still, waiting for that moment when motion feels more natural than stillness, when the cave's quiet begins to lose its night-thick edges, and sound re-enters the space not as an intrusion, but as a slow, soft layering. You finally open your eyes, fully blinking into the new warmth of morning firelight, and stretch your arms with the restraint of someone who doesn't want to be too enthusiastic about being awake. One leg extends, then the other, your feet greeting the cool stone floor with the familiar wince of contact. Around you, others are doing much the same, each emerging from their hides with various levels of resistance and commentary. The cave smells of smoke, of course, but also of people, warm, musky, slightly earthy people, and of fire-warmed stones, and the faint remnants of last night's stew that no one thought to scrape entirely from the cooking pot. You sit upright, scratching the side of your neck with a fingernail that still carries a smudge of yesterday's bark. A yawn escapes without effort, jaw creaking like a basket hinge. One of the early risers passes you a handful of dry roots, not as an offering exactly, but more as an unspoken suggestion that now would be a decent time to chew something. You accept it with a small grunt of approval, biting into the fibrous stalks with your back teeth. They don't taste like much, which is all things considered a mercy. The act of chewing, though, helps. It stirs the body from its blanket of inertia, each bite pulling you further into wakefulness. The fire burns steadily now, its glow casting a clear line between the warm circle of morning activity and the gray quiet of the deeper cave. You glance over to where your net still lies, its progress paused at an honest place, and then toward the entrance where the morning light spills in with more confidence, now soft gold edging toward clarity. The air outside is brighter than it was just minutes ago, and the smell of dew and soil is strong enough to pull your thoughts outward. Someone nearby grunts softly and begins stacking gourds for refilling their motions slow but sure, the kind of ritual that marks the beginning of daily necessity. Another squats by the fire, inspecting the coals and poking the ashes, as if seeking out a story only they can read. A pair of children pass by, both barefoot and covered in the fine dust of their sleeping piles, one holding a stick like a spear, the other dragging a scrap of hide they refuse to part with. You finish your roots, wiping your hands on your thigh, and push yourself upright with the slow determination of someone whose body has not yet signed the official wake-up agreement. Your back protests faintly, but you ignore it. There are tasks to be done, even if no one has spoken them aloud. You move toward the front of the cave, stepping carefully around a loose bundle of reeds someone left unclaimed, and pause just short of the threshold, letting your eyes adjust to the full morning light. The forest beyond stretches calmly, still draped in the fine mist that rises early and vanishes without explanation. Birds call out to one another with what could be greetings or arguments, and the trees stand as they always do, resolute, gently swaying, and mostly uninterested in your presence. You step outside. The ground is cool beneath your feet, damp with the promise that the sun hasn't quite done its job yet. You crouch by the nearest flat rock, one that always gathers a thin pool of water overnight, and splash your face. The shock of it is brief and bracing enough to seal the transition from half-sleep to full participation. You rub your eyes clear and sit on the rock for a moment, letting the breeze tug lightly at your hair, which feels both tangled and indifferent. Behind you, the cave is beginning to hum the shifting of bodies, the rustle of hides, the quiet conversations of people deciding together and apart what this day will be. You hear someone attempting to whistle not well, but persistently. Another sings a line of something that might be a song or just an old memory put to rhythm. You stand and stretch once more, arms overhead, this time spine lengthening in a slow cascade. Then you turn back inside, because your morning work won't complete itself. The fire needs tending, which someone else is doing, but you go to it anyway, and offer assistance in the form of watching closely and murmuring your agreement about the size of the flame. It is too small, and also fine. You gather a few sticks, break one over your knee, and place it carefully. The coals welcome it with a reluctant sizzle. Breakfast, or what passes for it, begins to take shape less of a meal and more of a continuation of chewing. Some dried tubers are rehydrated in the cooking pot, water dripped carefully from a half-empty gourd. There is no ceremony to it, but the effort is sincere. Someone offers you a chunk of dried root softened from the fire-warmed pot. You take it, bite down, and nod. The taste is almost the same as the smell. You finish your piece in silence, then help pass the gourd for others to scoop out portions. As the sun climbs higher, the light through the cave mouth becomes sharper, tracing golden patterns across the floor. Children dart in and out of the beams like shadows, with opinions, their laughter muted by the thick air. Someone outside claps their hands, once a signal maybe, or just an expression of mild exasperation, and a few others begin to gather their tools for whatever the morning will demand. You remain seated for a few more breaths, the flavor of root still on your tongue, the warmth of the fire steady at your side before slowly rising once again and preparing yourself to choose a path. Though path is a generous term for what the forest offers, you step outside once more this time with clearer purpose, though not necessarily more energy. Around you, others are beginning to spread out, each taking up a rhythm of movement that appears uncoordinated, but somehow avoids collision. One heads toward the grove where berries sometimes exist, if the birds haven't taken the morning shift too seriously. Another makes their way toward the river bend, dragging a net that has seen more hopeful days. You look to the left, then to the right, and then settle on forward. Not because you expect anything particularly exciting in that direction, but because it's different than yesterday, and that seems like enough. The air is cool on your arms, and the leaves overhead drip with the remnants of dew that never asked permission to land. You carry your pouch, now modestly repaired, with a fresh length of bark twine, and in your other hand, a stick, not sharp, not dull, just comfortingly solid. It thuds gently against your thigh with each step, a steady companion in an otherwise silent morning. The trees close around you, not in a threatening way, but more like an absent-minded embrace. Sunlight speckles through the canopy, landing in patches that seem placed by someone with a slight preference for asymmetry. You avoid stepping directly on the brightest ones, not out of superstition, but because it feels somehow polite to leave them untouched. As you walk, the sounds of the cave fade behind you. The crackle of fire, the occasional grunt, the soft calls of names that aren't names so much as noises with meaning. Now there is only the rustle of your feet against leaves, the creak of your knees when you crouch to inspect a curious rock, and the irregular calls of birds who haven't settled on one particular mood for the day. You move slowly, not because you are particularly cautious, but because the forest asks for slowness. Every few steps, you pause either to listen or because something vaguely root-shaped has caught your eye. You find a few leaves you recognize not useful, but pleasantly shaped, and tuck them into your pouch. You find a stone that fits perfectly in the palm of your hand, warm and flat, and doing a very good job of being a stone. You carry it for a while before placing it carefully on a mossy log as an offering to no one in particular. As the sun rises higher, the shadows shift, and the air grows warmer, not hot, but cozy in a way that reminds you of napping beside the fire after a long chew. You reach a small clearing, not large enough to be remarkable, but open enough to stretch your legs without dodging branches. Here, you sit on a fallen log that's slowly becoming part of the earth again, and you pull from your pouch a piece of yesterday's dried root, not because you're hungry, but because chewing gives shape to thought. The log beneath you is soft with decay, and as you shift your weight slightly, a puff of damp earth rises, carrying with it the faint scent of mushrooms and forgotten rain. You close your eyes for a moment, listening, not for anything specific, but to acknowledge the sounds that exist without your input. Somewhere in the distance, something rustles, large enough to notice, small enough not to worry about. A bird flaps loudly in a bush for reasons known only to birds. A drop of water lands on your shoulder from a leaf that has held it all this time. You lean back against the curve of the log, one hand still wrapped around your stick, the other resting lightly on your pouch. You are not hiding, but neither are you rushing. The forest hums around you with the indifference of something that will keep doing what it does, whether or not you're here. Eventually, you rise again. There is nothing pressing, but still movement feels right. You continue in the same direction, stepping over roots with the grace of someone who has tripped often enough to learn, but not enough to be proud of it. You find a patch of mushrooms, not the edible kind, not the deadly kind, just the kind that look like they're having a private conversation. You nod at them in passing. Further ahead, a stream reveals itself, not large, not loud, but persistent, carving a shallow groove into the landscape like a soft reminder that water, given time, can move anything. You crouch beside it and cup your hands to sip the taste sharp and cold, waking your mouth more than the root ever did. You rinse your fingers, watching the water swirl away in patterns that no one will ever see again. As you stand, your shadow falls briefly across the surface, breaking it, then letting it return to its quiet routine. The sun is nearly overhead now. You can feel its weight on your shoulders, and the breeze has quieted. You consider turning back, not because you are far, but because you are far enough for now. There will be more forest tomorrow, more mushrooms holding meetings, more streams carving soft paths. You begin your return, retracing your steps without truly meaning to. The log is still there now, unoccupied. The stone you left remains on the moss, unmoved. The forest, it seems, has accepted your presence and your departure with equal indifference. Your legs feel loose, now warmed by motion, and your stick swings with a little more rhythm. You do not hurry. There is nothing to hurry for. The cave is waiting, still warm, still full of breath and smoke, and people pretending not to nap. And as you step lightly over a root you didn't see, on the way out, your thoughts begin to drift, not urgently, but with interest, toward the gentle prospect of sitting again. Because although walking has its merits, scenery, mildly exciting. Leaf discoveries, the satisfying squelch of unexpectedly damp moss. There is a particular kind of joy in returning to a surface that accepts your weight, like an old friend. As you approach the cave, it reappears in increments. First, the tops of the bushes that squat loyally beside the entrance. Then the trail of flattened grass and softly trampled leaves that mark the footpath no one officially maintains, but everyone uses. The cave mouth yawns open, just as it always does, not particularly eager, not disinterested, simply present. Smoke curls up in lazy arcs from within, carrying the unmistakable aroma of reheated stew and charred root, a combination that's somehow both unappetizing and deeply comforting. You step into the cool shade, blinking slightly as the light adjusts, and are met with the quiet rustle of mid-morning activities. Someone weaving, someone sorting, someone poking at something with clear suspicion, but no urgency. You nod at a few people, receiving nods in return, the kind that mean welcome back, even if no one says the words. You make your way toward your spot near the fire, not too close, not too far, just where the heat meets the draft, and lower yourself onto your habitual sitting stone with a sigh that escapes before you can stop it. The stone greets you with the same mild firmness it always does, and you rest your stick beside you, leaning it against a patch of wall worn smooth from similar visits. From across the fire, someone holds up a chunk of bark with something smeared on it, possibly mashed berries, possibly overcooked tuber paste, and raises an eyebrow. You raise one back and receive the offering, nodding in acknowledgement of the strange but edible gift. It tastes vaguely sweet, vaguely bitter, and entirely like something someone made on purpose with the best ingredients available at the time. You chew slowly, letting your jaw reacquaint itself with the effort and scaw the room. The children are corralled to one side, engaged in a sort of organized play that involves stacking small stones and unstacking them with apparent joy. One elder sits beside the fire with a net in their lap, eyes half-lidded, working more from memory than sight. The hum of daily life is low but steady, a kind of audible sigh that rises and falls with motion, breathing, soft mutters, and the occasional clack of bone against stone. You finish your bark snack, wipe your fingers on your tunic without ceremony, and lean back against the cave wall. A sliver of sun cuts across the floor in front of you, the dust within it dancing like lazy insects with nowhere to be. You let your gaze follow the drift of smoke up toward the ceiling, where the soot streaks tell a story of many fires, many nights, many meals eaten in the same rough circle. Your thoughts wander, not toward anything grand or distant, but to small details, the texture of the stick you carried, the stone that pressed gently against your heel on the walk back, the peculiar fold in one of your hides that always refuses to lie flat. These are the kinds of thoughts that fill the day, not with purpose exactly, but with presence. Someone walks past and drops a handful of dried herbs into the stew pot, stirring it with a bark ladle that wobbles slightly, but still gets the job done. You hear the familiar squelch of paste against the sides, and the bubbling that follows like a tired paw. The smell that emerges is slightly better than before, though still not good. A young one tries to sneak a taste and is gently redirected with a soft tap of a spoon on the forehead. No words are spoken, but the lesson is understood. The day continues in its slow spiral. Outside, the birds have grown quieter, their morning arguments resolved or postponed. The sun has risen higher, shifting the patch of light near your feet slightly to the left, and a faint breeze enters the cave mouth, curling around ankles and lifting stray strands of hair. You close your eyes for a few breaths, not to sleep, but to press pause. Behind your eyelids, the world becomes a soft mix of warmth, movement, and the lingering taste of rootberry paste. When you open them again, little has changed, which is exactly what you hoped for. Across the fire, someone begins to sing, not loudly, not with any particular melody, just a low, repetitive tune that sounds like walking, or stirring, or thinking very slowly. The others don't join in, but they don't interrupt. The song fills the space gently, giving shape to the quiet. You watch the flames dance their patterns, unpredictable and familiar, and begin to consider, though not urgently, what the afternoon might hold. Perhaps gathering more fiber, perhaps sitting in a different spot, perhaps starting a new net, though your fingers are not entirely convinced. You reach for your pouch, more out of habit than need, and rummage through it slowly. The contents are unremarkable leaves, bits of bark, a piece of string that used to be part of something more important, but they are yours. You finger them idly, sorting and resorting, letting the texture and weight remind you of where you've been today. From deeper in the cave, a faint laugh echoes, short, surprised, then gone. You glance toward the sound, but do not pursue it. It's enough to know. Laughter still exists in the background of your day. You lean back once more, hands resting on your knees, body warmed by the fire, mind gently unfocused. This is the middle of the day, and you are right where you belong, surrounded by stonin and smoke, and people doing mostly nothing but doing it together. Soon you might rise or not. You might help stir the pot, or simply offer a quiet opinion on its seasoning. But for now, you are seated still and quietly open to whatever. The fire continues its steady flicker, no longer demanding attention, but still content to be observed. And you shift slightly on your stone, enough to ease the pressure from one side to the other, without causing the kind of movement that might accidentally suggest commitment. The half-filled stew pot makes a gentle bubbling noise that's neither urgent nor particularly enthusiastic, just consistent, like a pot that knows it isn't anyone's favorite, but still shows up every day. The air inside the cave has grown warmer, touched now by the sun that filters in through the entrance and wraps itself lazily around shoulders and backs. You allow the heat to soak into your skin, let your shoulders droop a little, and breathe through your nose, as if that might better absorb the moment. It smells like stone and smoke and something slightly sweet that might be the roots someone dropped in the fire earlier by mistake. A few voices begin to rise softly again, not loud, not even intentional, more like sounds that escaped before their owners noticed. One person discusses in mostly gestures the quality of their weaving project. Another describes a bird they saw or imagined or dreamed about. It's unclear, and no one asks for clarification. You stand slowly, using the familiar push from your knees that suggests a general willingness to continue being awake. Your back sighs with you as you straighten, and your pouch swings gently at your side, its contents unchanged, but somehow more meaningful, now that they've survived a full hour of idleness. You glance around and notice a loose pile of netting off to one side, partly coiled, partly resigned. Without fully thinking, you walk toward it and pick it up, fingers testing the tension between the strands. It's someone else's work, but it welcomes your interference. You begin mending a corner that's been frayed by time or disinterest, or possibly a small but determined rodent. Your hands find the rhythm, quickly, twist, thread, tighten, smooth. It's not a fast process, nor a particularly necessary one, but it fills the space between your ears with something other than wandering. Around you, the cave is alive with the soft hum of people not quite working. A child shuffles past you, carrying a stick twice their height. dragging it behind them with the solemnity of someone who believes they've just discovered a new kind of tree. An elder coughs gently and is offered a gourd of water by someone who always seems to know where the water is. Near the fire, someone leans over. The pot tastes the contents and adds what looks suspiciously like yesterday's dried herbs. You continue mending the net, gradually flattening the corner into something that resembles usefulness. The fibers are dry but compliant, and your fingers remember the knot patterns even before you do. Occasionally, you pause to flick away a bit of bark or inspect a strand that seems overly ambitious. No one interrupts. This is the kind of task that earns quiet approval, not because it matters much, but because it is unmistakably peaceful. After a while, your legs begin to protest gently, so you sit down on the floor cross-legged and spread the net across your lap. The cave floor is warm, where the sun touches it cooler in the shadows, and you find yourself straddling both like someone negotiating with their knees. The light continues to shift, moving gradually up the wall like a slow, glowing tide. You lose track of time in the netting, measuring progress not in completion, but in the subtle satisfaction of symmetry. Across the way, someone plays a small rhythm on a hollowed log, not music exactly, but patterned enough to suggest intention. The rhythm is simple, repetitive, and surprisingly calming. You nod in its direction once and keep working. Eventually, a hand rests lightly on your shoulder. It's one of the children, their eyes wide with a question too complex for words and too simple for delay. They hold up a tangled bit of string that was once a necklace or maybe an experimental snare. You take it, examine it, and begin untangling without speaking. The child sits beside you, knees pulled to their chest, watching intently as you coax the strands apart with slow patience. It doesn't take long, but the child's quiet makes the task feel more significant. Once it's sorted, you hand it back with a slight nod. They accept it solemnly and scurry off string in hand, purpose renewed. You return to the net and realize that you've nearly repaired the entire edge without quite meaning to. You test the tension, adjust a knot, and sit back for a moment, letting the completion settle over you, like a blanket you forgot you were wearing. The cave has quieted slightly again, the fire crackling softly in its corner, the stew pot now resting emptied of anything worth chewing. People stretch, rise, shift. The shadows lengthen slightly. Outside, a breeze rustles the leaves, hinting that the afternoon is moving into its quieter half. You roll the net carefully, place it beside the stone wall where it will wait for someone to need it again, and dust your hands off on your tunic. You glance around, not searching, just observing. Everything is right where it should be, or close enough to it. You rise again, more easily this time, and begin walking toward the back of the cave, past the fire, past the cracked gourd. Someone still hasn't thrown out, past the place where the shadows begin to deepen, and the light begins to speak in whispers. You're not headed anywhere in particular, but there's something soothing about the cool dimness of the deeper cave where the sounds of fire and conversation begin to muffle into a kind of background murmur, like hearing someone talking through a thick curtain. Your feet move with quiet confidence, padding softly over the uneven ground that you've stepped on enough times to navigate without thinking. Here the walls draw closer, gently, funneling the air into a kind of hush that smells faintly of stone, old smoke, and something mossy. A few others sit here as well, scattered across the darker corners, not hiding, just preferring stillness with less light. One nods at you as you pass. You nod back. No one speaks. Speaking isn't forbidden in this part of the cave, but it happens less the way one speaks less in a library or when watching small animals eat. You settle onto a low outcrop of stone that your body fits against more comfortably than you'd like to admit. It's slightly sloped, gently curved, from centuries of nothing in particular, and it accepts your spine like it's done this before. You lean back and let your legs slide forward until your heels rest against a patch of sandy grit. Somewhere behind you, water drips slow, irregular, the cave's own lazy clock. You breathe through your nose again, slower, now your ribs expanding gently against the soft press of your tunic. The air down here is cooler, quieter, thicker, in a way that doesn't press, but lingers. You close your eyes, not to sleep, not yet, but to let the dark match the mood behind your eyelids. And there you sit, breathing, noticing yourself noticing. The cave doesn't demand attention, which is what makes you give it. A spider lowers itself from the ceiling, pausing mid-air, as if to reconsider. You open one eye slightly, watching its slow descent. It turns once, then climbs back up, vanishing into a crack that wasn't visible until it moved. You wonder what it knows. Time in this place moves differently. Not slower exactly, but in longer units, like a story told by someone who pauses often to scratch their nose. You think about nothing in particular. You think about the feel of bark between your fingers, the soft tug of thread through a frayed loop, the distant rhythm of someone knocking two bones together out of boredom. You think about water and how it decides where to go, and about moss and how it never needs permission. After a while, the quiet begins to fill you in a way that noise never does. Your thoughts stop forming shapes and instead become a slow current that swirls gently in the corners of your mind. There is no urgency here, no next step. The longer you sit, the more it feels like you've always been sitting. Eventually, the faint clatter of someone tripping over a loose stick echoes faintly from the main chamber, pulling your awareness back toward your limbs. You stretch one leg, then the other, flexing your toes inside your hide-wrapped footwear, which has long since molded itself to the shape of your indifference. You rise slowly, bones creaking in soft chorus, and begin to move again. Not because you must, but because movement has returned to your list of acceptable states. On your way back through the middle section of the cave, you pass the pile of old tools neatly arranged in a way that suggests someone had a brief burst of organization yesterday. You pause and sift through them absently. A flint scraper, a bone needle dulled at the tip, a small blade wrapped in a strip of bark to protect a handle that no longer exists. You consider them, admire their past usefulness, then leave them where they are. Their time will come again. Back in the central chamber, the light has changed once more. The sun now hangs lower in the sky outside, casting an amber glow that slices across the floor at a dramatic angle that no one comments on. The fire has been stirred back into activity, its embers crackling in friendly disapproval of their own brief neglect. A new pot is being filled slower now, with more discussion. There is the sound of someone listing their available ingredients out loud, not because anyone asked, but because listing them makes them feel more real. You drift near the edge of this new preparation, not offering to help, not avoiding it either. You're in that quiet state where even peeling bark or rinsing roots feels optional and vaguely ceremonial. Someone beside you drops a small bunch of tubers into a gourd of water with a wet plop that sends up a few droplets. One lands on your foot. Neither of you says anything. A moment later, another person sits down beside you, holding a stick with a sharp tip and a half-carved something on the other end. They begin to whittle, scraping slow curls of wood that fall in little spirals between your legs. The rhythm is pleasing. It reminds you of walking through tall grass or of stirring stew when it's too thick to behave. The stick makes a soft ticking sound as it strikes a small stone with each pass. No one asks what it is. Eventually, the stew pot begins to steam again, the first wisps of scent rising in soft, invisible lines. The air fills with anticipation. Not hunger exactly, but the comfort of knowing that something is cooking, that someone is stirring, that soon you'll hold a warm gourd in your hands and pretend the flavor is new. You rest your elbows on your knees and watch the fire, letting its motion pull your gaze just far enough into nothing. You're aware of your breathing again, of your shoulders, of the slight crack in the floor that no one's tripped over yet, but someone inevitably will. And as the evening begins its approach, as the shadows start stretching themselves out like animals waking from naps, you feel the familiar pull, not strong, not urgent, but certain toward the next small thing you might do. After, the next small thing turns out to be sitting slightly closer to the fire, which has now committed to its early evening role, with just enough enthusiasm to warrant a cautious shuffle of stones around its base. You drag your sitting rock a few inches forward, not a loud move, not a showy one, just enough to better feel the warmth on your shins. Someone has started ladling stew into various vessels with a rhythm that suggests they've done this for probably yesterday, and the day before that, and possibly even during a dream last week. You hold out your gourd automatically, neither smiling nor frowning, and it's filled with a portion that steams politely and smells vaguely of tuber root and something that might have once been a leaf. The surface bubbles faintly as you lower yourself back onto your rock and cradle the gourd in both hands, as much for warmth as for sustenance. Around you, others are doing the same, some hunched over, some sprawled, some crouched in postures that suggest they've never entirely trusted the concept of chairs. There are no utensils. You sip carefully, letting the heat linger on your tongue, trying not to burn the roof of your mouth, but failing just slightly. The taste is not exciting, which is a relief. It is familiar. It is the taste of effort that has simmered long enough to become agreeable. Occasionally, you bite down on something unexpectedly firm and choose not to investigate further. The air in the cave is changing again. Less smoky now, more heavy with the scent of cooked roots and damp bark. The sun outside is slanting low, turning the entrance into a golden rectangle that narrows with each passing breath. The shadows stretch longer, wrapping themselves around ankles and creeping up the cave walls like hesitant guests. Conversation remains muted. One person mentions the noise a bird made. Another agrees that yes, it was a bird, and yes, it did make noise. A third wonders if the bird is still out there. No one offers to check. Your stew cools slightly, allowing you to sip with more enthusiasm. You finish it slowly, savoring the last few spoonless mouthfuls, then tip the gourd sideways to examine what remains, a single sliver of root, one suspicious fleck of something green, and a layer of liquid that tastes more like smoke than food. You drink it anyway. Waste is frowned upon, but mostly because someone else might have liked that last bit. You set your gourd down beside you and stretch your legs toward the fire, flexing your toes against the warmth. Beside you, someone lets out a sigh that seems to have been building since mid-morning. Another hums a tune with no melody, just a soft, looping sound that could be a lullaby, or could be their stomach responding to a disappointing root. You glance toward the entrance. Outside, the trees are beginning to blur, losing their individual outlines as the light thins. A breeze carries in the scent of earth and old leaves brushing past your face like a memory you hadn't planned to recall. Behind you, a child laughs, a short, sharp burst, followed by the dull thud of something being dropped. No one scolds. The sound of laughter, even unplanned, is generally appreciated. You lean back slightly, shifting your weight onto one arm, and look toward the pile of nets again. Some are finished. Some are not. All will be useful at some point. The fire pops once, sending up a brief spray of sparks that vanish before anyone can react. One spark lands near your gourd and is quickly smothered by someone's toe. You nod in appreciation. They nod back. The stew pot is nearly empty now, its contents reduced to a shallow puddle that reflects the flickering fire like a tired eye. Someone scrapes the sides with the ladle, trying to coax one last serving from the residue. Another person offers a small bark bowl and receives something approximating a meal. They eat it gratefully. The evening settles in not with fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of a shadow that has nowhere else to be. The fire grows brighter against the dimming world, becoming the sun's humble understudy. You sit still, letting the warmth reach your fingers and the fading light touch your eyelids. Around you, the noises have faded again, chewing, replaced by swallowing, swallowing by sighing, sighing by breathing. Someone begins to stack the used gourds in a loose pile. Another begins to hum again, the same not melody, slower now, like they're unwinding a thought that never fully formed. The light at the entrance is nearly gone. What remains is the soft silver blue of twilight, a color that exists only for a few moments before being overtaken by true dark. You shift your weight again, this time, onto your heels, rising slowly as your knees argue in familiar tones. Your gourd is tucked under your arm. You do not wash it yet. That is for later, or perhaps tomorrow. You move toward the wall where the finished nets are kept, and hang yours there, not quite ceremoniously, but with a sense of conclusion. A task completed is not a celebration, but it is a kind of quiet punctuation. The others continue their post-meal rituals, adjusting hides, poking at the fire, brushing away crumbs that were never visible to begin with. The day has one last breath in it, maybe two. You feel it in your shoulders, in the heaviness of your limbs, in the slow way you lower yourself beside the wall, again, folding your knees and resting your back against the familiar curve of stone. The fire crackles again, less brightly now, but still present. The last light from outside disappears, leaving only the warm flicker and the soft rhythm of breath and rustle. Someone lies down nearby. Another adjusts their seat with a grunt. No one says good night. They don't need to. The cave, like the people in it, knows how to listen. And what it listens to now is the collective softening of movement, the kind that signals the end of needing to do anything for the day. You remain leaned against the cave wall, your back pressing into the stone that has slowly absorbed the warmth of your presence, your legs extended loosely before you, one heel idly rotating against the cool grit of the floor. The gourd under your arm remains there, not heavy, but undeniably present, like a sleeping pet. You haven't the heart to move. Around you, the others drift into various stages of rest, or nearly rest, or post-meal contemplation, so still it might as well be sleep. The fire has entered its patient phase. Now, its earlier brightness subdued into a glow that flickers low and wide, lighting the faces of those who remain close enough to be seen. Shadows no longer stretch, they lounge. Someone near the fire pokes at it half-heartedly with a long stick, not to stir it, but more to confirm that it's still there. A gentle tap here, a shift in the coals there, not enough to startle the embers, just enough to acknowledge the ritual. You exhale through your nose and watch the warmth of your breath drift visibly into the dim space before vanishing without fanfare. From deeper within the cave, a small cough echoes, once dry and brief. No one responds, not because they don't care, but because it didn't ask for anything. The net pile remains untouched now, as it should. The pots are stacked, the tools, resting. A child has fallen asleep mid-lie, their body curled awkwardly near a wall, with a bark bowl still resting on their stomach. Someone gently retrieves the bowl and sets it aside, covering the child with a hide in a motion so practiced it barely registers as an action. You adjust your own position, shifting slightly to one side so the edge of a rock doesn't press into your hip, and draw your knees closer, resting your arms across them. You're not tired yet, not exactly, but your muscles are already preparing their excuses for why they won't want to move later. Your thoughts are slow now, wide and unhurried, like logs drifting down a wide river. You don't try to steer them. You let them come and go, remembering the way light came through the trees, earlier the shape of that peculiar moss patch. You didn't stop to touch the weight of your stick as it tapped your leg with every other step. You consider where the stick might be, now probably leaning near the entrance where you left it. It will be there tomorrow. It has no reason to leave. You let your eyes close, not tightly, just enough to soften the edges of the firelight. It dances behind your eyelids, flickering orange and red and shadow blue, never repeating the same pattern. The sounds in the cave have thinned to the essentials, breathing fire, a few creaks of bodies settling into place. You can just make out the gentle scuff of someone dragging a hide closer to the fire, followed by the whump of them lowering their weight onto it. No one speaks. There is nothing that needs saying. A few moments pass, minutes, perhaps longer, marked only by the subtle rhythm of time preparing itself for the quiet hours. You shift again, this time, drawing your legs fully to your chest and resting your chin atop your folded arms. Your body knows this pose. It remembers this shape. From this position, you can see the cave's entrance, a dark shape, framed by slightly darker shapes. The forest beyond has vanished into silhouette, all detail erased by the collapse of light. Only the faintest hints remain: the occasional sway of a branch, the twinkle of a star if you squint toward the left sky gap. You think briefly of those who might be outside still, if anyone is. Perhaps someone took a long walk and lost track of time. Perhaps they're just sitting by the river, listening to the night breathe through the reeds. You do not worry for them. They'll return, or they won't. The cave will still be here either way. You lower your head to your arms, letting your cheek rest against the soft fabric of your tunic. The scent of the stew still clings faintly to it, not unpleasant, not strong, just present, like everything else tonight. You begin to hum very quietly, not a song, but a vibration, more for your own benefit than anyone else's. A low tone that matches your breath, steady and unremarkable. It helps smooth the last rough edges of thought. A few others stir. One lies down fully with a long exhale. Another rustles their pouch as they shift into a more convincing version of rest. The cave is nearly still. The fire burns lower. The last light has long since faded from the entrance, replaced by the cool breath of nighttime air drifting lazily into the space. It brushes against your face, tucks around your arms, curls up under your legs, like a small animal, finding a place to rest. You don't move. There's nothing to reach for. No last task to complete. Just the comfort of position, the warmth of stone behind you, the closeness of those who remain. You let your eyelids grow heavier. The hum fades into breath. The cave, silent now, but not empty, wraps around you like a second hide. It holds still. It listens. And as the night continues to unfold itself, not suddenly, but with the quiet resolve of a heavy blanket being drawn up over the shoulders of a day too tired to resist. You remain tucked into your seated shape, half curled and unbothered, your breath slow and steady against the warm fabric of your tunic, which now carries the layered scent of everything the day touched: smoke, root stew, faint bark, dust, and the musky earthiness of a cave that has held more evenings than you can count. Around you, others have made their choices between lying flat or curling sideways, between facing the fire or turning toward the shadows. No one speaks. There is no final word. Rest arrives, not as an announcement, but as a gradual folding inward, each body surrendering its upright posture like a tree bowing gently in windless weather. You shift only once, a quiet roll onto your side, your knees drawing a little closer to your chest, your arm slipping beneath your head to cushion the small unevenness of the ground. The stone floor is cool but familiar. The curve of your body knows where to settle. Behind you, someone lets out a low sigh, a release of air more emotional than respiratory, and then stillness follows. The fire remains the only moving thing, its flickers growing small and soft, casting elongated shadows that stretch and merge like forgotten thoughts across the cave walls. The embers glow slow and red and deep, pulsing with the quiet confidence of heat that doesn't need to prove anything. Somewhere near the back of the cave, a child murmurs in sleep, a sound without words, followed by the tiny thud of a limb falling back into place. The cave breathes. That is the only way to describe it now. A deep, collective breath that rises and falls across a dozen chests, sinking unconsciously like leaves drifting on the same breeze. Outside, if you were listening, you might hear the forest settle into its own hush, the occasional chirp of an insect, the soft rustle of an unseen creature moving cautiously across leaf litter, the distant hoot of something nocturnal making its usual comment about the moon. These sounds reach the cave in fragments woven into the night air that drifts through the entrance and mingles gently with the warmth still radiating from the fire. You are not fully asleep. Not yet. But your thoughts no longer have sharp edges. They are slow and wide now, looping, without destination, sliding gently from one to the next, like stones polished by a long river. You think of walking earlier, the way your stick tapped the ground with a rhythm that wasn't quite music. You remember the cold water against your hands, the spider that descended and changed its mind. You remember chewing bark that tasted slightly like regret and slightly like yesterday. These memories arrive in no order and with no particular importance. They come because they were there. You open your eyes for a moment just to confirm the fire is still glowing. And it is. The red light paints the walls with an ancient kind of softness, highlighting the soot, the shallow carvings, the handprints faded to smudges, as though the cave itself is nodding in approval of how well you've all managed another day. You let your eyes close again this time, not because you want to, but because there's nothing left to see. Nothing new, nothing urgent, nothing that won't be there when the sun decides to return. Your fingers twitch once, an echo of some distant gesture your body forgot to make. Then stillness returns. You hear the shift of a hide being pulled a little higher across someone's back, the faint creak of a joint adjusting to its final angle, the sigh of firewood giving in to gravity. Everything is winding down now, not in silence, but in a soft chorus of familiar endings. Even your breath has taken on the rhythm of the cave, slow measured, like water, dripping patiently onto stone. You are aware of your body only in the way one is aware of being wrapped in something comfortable. A foot pressed gently against another leg, a hand resting under a cheek, your chest rising, your chest falling, the steady hum of other lives breathing beside you. You have no reason to move, no reason to speak, no reason to do anything but be here now, while the fire hums, the shadows grow deeper, and the night continues to lean closer, whispering with the voice of bark and root and smoke and sleep. And in this place, with your head resting against your arm and your thoughts trailing like the last strands of a half-woven net, you allow the drift to pull you further gently toward the final hush that follows, that final hush, the one that doesn't arrive suddenly, but seeps in slowly through the cracks between thoughts and the gentle weight of your own body beginning to forget its edges. You lie motionless, not out of effort, but because the cave has agreed to hold you still, its familiar stone surface now softened by the sheer repetition of your shape against it. The fire has retreated even further now, not gone, but distilled into the quiet glow of a few embers that breathe more than they burn. Their warmth doesn't reach your face anymore, only lingers as a fading suggestion near your toes, which you haven't bothered to wiggle in several breaths. The darkness has thickened around you, not like a curtain pulled shut, but more like ink dropped slowly into water, spreading evenly, coating everything with an equal sense of pause. Around you, the cave's sleepers have melted deeper into their chosen positions. The child whose arm had slipped from their side now curls it back without waking. Someone murmurs a few syllables that don't form a sentence, their lips parting for a moment before falling silent again. Even the air has shifted. It flows slower, lower, no longer bouncing or swirling, but hugging the contours of the cave, as though trying not to wake anyone. You are no longer thinking of the day. Not truly. The thoughts that do come are small, soft flashes. How your stick leaned against the wall, how the stew had a barky aftertaste, how the light through the trees looked like spilled flour when the breeze caught it just right. But they drift through you now, harmless, without hooks, like watching familiar shapes in a stream, and knowing none of them require attention. Your breath has slowed further, aligning itself with something ancient and quiet. Each inhale takes a little longer. Each exhale leaves you a little more weightless. You feel a slight itch near your shoulder, but choose not to scratch it. The effort would feel out of place now, like coughing during a lullaby. Instead, you let the sensation fade, which it does obediently. Somewhere outside, a night animal lets out a single call, a low, undramatic sound that barely registers as notable. It enters the cave like a feather might unnoticed, except by those whose dreams include feathers. A breeze follows it, barely a breath, and brushes across the top of your hand. Your fingers twitch in reply, then return to stillness. The ceiling of the cave above you is no longer visible, but you know it's there, shaped by countless years of wind and rain and smoke and stillness, its surface etched with soot and the faint imprints of old hands and old fire. You picture it in your mind, not because you need to, but because imagining the familiar is as easy as sleeping. One more murmur rises nearby, a gentle exhale, ending in a half snore that resolves into silence. The smell of the coals is faint now, less smoke than memory. Your body continues to relax in pieces, your back settling deeper, your knees slightly bending, your jaw softening until it hangs open, just a little. Sleep is not here yet, but it is close, very close. It walks slowly, respectfully, taking off its shoes at the edge of the fire circle. It does not rush you. It waits, hands clasped, as if watching to see whether you need another moment to finish your last unimportant thought. That thought, it turns out, is about a particular leaf you saw earlier, round and yellow, tucked beneath the edge of a stone, catching light like it had somewhere to be. You don't remember if you picked it up. It doesn't matter. The thought flutters once and then dissolves. Another thought follows a question about whether tomorrow's walk will lead toward the bend in the river or the long ridge where the moss grows thickest. That one fades too. You are nearly weightless now, not floating, not flying, just settled so completely that even gravity feels redundant. The fire lets out a final pop, not loud, just enough to say it's still trying. No one stirs. A foot brushes lightly against your ankle in sleep, then moves away. You do not mind. You do not move. You are here. That's all. There's no story now, only warmth and stillness, and the hush of others sharing the same breath, the same cave, the same uncomplicated moment before sleep becomes everything. A flicker of light dances across your eyelids one last time. You do not open your eyes. You do not need to. The dark behind them is complete and kind and ready. Just a few more breaths, just a few more seconds before